Hello. Thank you for your interest in my debut children's novel, The Kreepton Chronicles. Whether you're already a fan or wish to find out more before you dive into the blog world of my imagination, I would like to invite you to discover my journey of how my book came to be. Before I tell you more about my book, allow me to introduce myself. This book is written by Renee Libra. That's me, right? Well, those of you who know me, you know I'm not a Renee. I wrote this book using the name Renee Libra because I wanted to establish a brand of an author, like a pen name. And I felt that Renee Libra represents myself better than my government-approved official title. Well, what does the name really mean? It has two meanings. First of all, Renee has the same word root as that time period in Europe about 500 years ago known as the Renaissance. Well, the Renaissance means rebirth or to be born again. And those who love history out there, rebirth of what? Classical Greek culture. The Renaissance was a time of cultural explosion. No, culture did not explode, but it just means that people were making so many arts of all forms and coming up with so many new ideas in science and philosophy that these new things were bursting out like crazy. For example, you may have heard of Romeo and Juliet by William Shakespeare. Or how about this painting? You know what it's called? The Mona Lisa. And who drew the Mona Lisa? This guy named Leonardo da Vinci. And the intellects or the educated people were expected to do so much more with the freedom to create. And of those centuries-old celebrity, Leonardo da Vinci was known as the Renaissance man. Not because he was somehow born again, no, but because he was skilled in art as well as science. My choice of Renee as my name is inspired by people like Da Vinci. And also, after over 8 years of being a stay-at-home mom, it's just about time for me to reborn into something new. The Libra in my name, it's like the balance, like the zodiac. And I have to balance myself to be the parent of my boys, ages 8 and 3, and as well as trying to find time to develop my career. And I tell people these days that I work 3 jobs. First and foremost, a stay-at-home mom for my boys, and second in real estate, and last but not least, an author. In other words, I'm one of those people who, instead of 24 hours, somehow have 30 hours a day. How did I become Renee? Well, to begin my journey, allow me to take you back to when I was about my son's age. So that was me when I was 9 years old. And yeah, we do go out into the wild quite a bit back in those days. And at that age, about that age, I had a dream. No, not the Martin Luther King Jr. kind of grand dream. No, just the one that you get when you're sleeping. I had a dream about a sword. And it was a sword that strings the users. And I decided that was like the coolest story ever and I should totally write it down. Which is one problem. I didn't know how to write the word sword. No, not this sword. This sword. English is not my first language. And I grew up in Hong Kong and people there speak a dialect of Chinese called Cantonese, and we also use characters. And well, back to that story about that sword. Well, never quite got beyond a page. A page with a few sentences full of circles and pictures of the characters that I didn't know how to write. Well, writing is not easy when you don't know how to write. Ugh. Anyway, I never attempted another story again for some years. Instead, I read. I read books with all kinds of stories, both realistic and fantasy, books with words, as well as books with pictures, like comic books. And the books I read serve as the basis for my writing style as well as my drawing style even till today. So when I was 14, my family came to America. And yeah, great. I mean, I was just starting to get a grasp of my first language, and now I have to figure out a second, English. Oh. I remember the first day of English class in 9th grade. The class was reading Shakespeare, the guy that I mentioned earlier. So Shakespeare, if you don't know, he was a famous playwright almost 500 years ago. 500-year-old English. Nice. Okay. Well, I didn't understand a thing that was written on that page, and the whole class was like, oh my god, that is so beautifully written. And I was like, is the word "thee" related to 3? I mean, they must really like that number back then, because it's all over the page. In case you didn't know, "thee" means you, Y-O-U, in Old English. Nothing to do with the number, but that's why it's all over the page. Well, my first English assignment was to write one side of one piece of binder paper on a topic. And at that time, the most I've ever had to write in English was like 50 words. So I stared at this hardest English assignment I've ever been assigned to for 2 hours, and I crafted out like half a page of poorly written middle school level work. I was frustrated. By the way, this is not mine, this is my son's writing, and obviously he could write a lot better than I did back then. Well, but that wasn't going to stop me from making something out of my life. For the next 3 years, I worked my bottoms off. From not knowing the difference between "thee" and "three" to doing a scene from a Shakespearean play. From just trying to navigate how to communicate in the American culture to writing for a speech contest. Though I lost, but I certainly gained some valuable experience, and I attempted public speaking, which is something that I would have never done up until that point. Towards the end of high school, I wrote another fan fiction based on the Transformers, and I also attempted another story in English this time. I got about 1/5 of that story that I intended to write. I might have been able to finish it, except I made a choice. Under my father's influence, I decided to study science, specifically genetics. In other words, I was one of those crazy scientists. We get to work with cool stuff like fruit flies and roadkills, and one sniff and you're dead, poison gas. Fun stuff. But genetics was really only my third favorite subject. Given what I've told you so far, what would you guess as my favorite subjects? History and languages. Halfway through college, I decided I was going to also study my favorite subjects. Now, scientists are only required to write just good enough to present straightforward information and hard facts to prove your hypothesis or, your theories. History, on the other hand, requires more complex writing style and more creativity in constructing a story to convince your readers of your point of view. So for my first history essay assignment, I cried over all the pages of research materials and trying to put them together into 10 type pages this time. Ugh, why did I do that to myself? I could have just stick with science and focus on that, but I don't want to regret. Someday when I look back, I want to savor having a chance to study my favorite subjects in college. So I kept those 10 pages until I finally had it figured out. And once I figure it out, I love it. I love it so much that I took a couple more history classes and nearly aced them all. Needless to say, I picked up some pretty valuable writing skills there. And during this time in my life, I didn't really spend much time writing outside of school, since I was already pretty burnt out from writing for school. Instead, I spent my fun time drawing. But without formal training like taking an art class, I never thought that was going to go anywhere. Until over 10 years ago, I met an opportunity. I met somebody who wrote a story and asked me to illustrate for her. Well, I did the drawings, and I'll show you a couple of them. And here they are. But unfortunately, that project didn't get carried out. Nevertheless, it sparked an idea in me. Maybe I want to be an illustrator. But like I said, I didn't really formally learn how to draw. So how am I going to do that? Well, after I graduated college and after spending over 4 years studying science, I decided I wasn't going to spend the rest of my life exclusively in a lab. So I went everywhere and I did all sorts of stuff in search for that job that I do want to do for the rest of my life. I tried different things, so I volunteered at museums, I sold customized closets, I taught English in a small city in Japan, I organized some cultural activities in a German village, I did interpreting, and I even considered working at a theater. But at the end of all that, I settled down for the least glamorous, most underappreciated long hours, back-breaking, no pay, and yet the most exciting job of all time. A stay-home mom. Fast forward 10 years, I became the mom of an avid reader. My son finished the entire Harry Potter series when he was in 2nd grade. And if you know the story well, you know that by book 4, the melodramas start to get a little intense. Who needs all that when you're in elementary school? I had a hard time finding books that are age appropriate and yet challenge his reading skills. A friend recommended Tuck Everlasting. If you have read the book or seen the movie, Tuck Everlasting is a celebrated children's novel. And there, I found my answer. Out of curiosity, I looked up the author, Natalie Barbitt, and she was originally an illustrator for her husband's writings. But at some point her husband got too busy to write, and their publisher encouraged her to write in his place instead. In one of her interviews, one thing that she said struck a bell. She said because she didn't have a book to illustrate for, she wrote her own to do so. That's it. I can be both an illustrator and an author. But first, I need an idea for a book. It was Halloween of 2015. My son decided that we're going to have Minecraft themed decorations. And so there we were. I was Mrs. Enderman and my boys were Zombie and Baby Zombie. And we also made a life-size 4 feet tall creeper out of cardboard boxes. And we also used that as a prototype at my son's Harvest Fest booth, where we get to get rid of some creepers. So anyway, in the aftermath of that night, that creeper kind of stayed outside our door for months. Oh, maybe so we could scare away some evil spirit that gets the gloves. Partly also because I didn't have space in my garage to store it. And it looks really cool. So at some point, a thought came to me. If there really were a creeper outside our door, what could it be doing? And from that thought, the Kreepton Chronicle was born. The story opens with a lone creeper dwell on our front porch. and in the next video I will tell you more about the story.